Sit back and get comfortable. I have a few stories to share with you.
I always told Sarah and our children that I was only afraid of death. Nothing else frightened me. Not even heights or spiders. Only the inevitability of one day facing my own mortality. I don't fear it anymore. No, I welcome it. I beg for it in these everlasting, unending moments. There is no rest for me, as I can't sleep. I'm forced to stay awake and listen for my resting place, accompanied in this void by the constant beating of my heart. It is a curse, and I don't know what I did to deserve such a fate. My family can't hear me because they believe that I'm already dead. I hear them when they visit me, though. They treat my resting place as a confessional, sharing their most intimate thoughts and beliefs, as though they are speaking to no one at all. But no, I hear them. I have no choice. It is a small gift that, over these long years, these visits have become so less frequent. Sarah was the first to stop visiting. She begged for forgiveness and understanding, as she had finally relented to our children's wishes and moved on from our union. Their stepfather was kind to them, and they were both on the path to truly seeing him as a father. I'm sure that you would want me to move forward, she told me, unable to hear my silent protests. He keeps me safe. He makes me happy. Daggers to my still beating heart. I don't think I've wished for death more than I did that day, if only to end my constant suffering. Michael was the second to stop visiting. He admitted to resenting me, to hating me for not being there, to teach him how to be a man. He blamed me for his own immaturity. It pained my heart when Renee stopped by recently to hear from my resting place that my daughter walked down the aisle with her stepfather instead of me, that she was expecting her first child in the coming months. She had the audacity to pray that I would be there to watch over my granddaughter, guiding her as she enters the world I'm so desperate to leave. I spit on her prayers. Renee believed, in her more candid moments of confession, that she was the only one to care for me after all these years. She saw her more frequent visits to my resting place as a badge of honor, something to brag to her friends about, because it made her feel like a good person. If she wished to honor her father's memory, she would have pulled the plug years ago. But of course, she insists that I wouldn't want that, which I suppose is my own fault. He was only ever afraid of one thing, she'd tell the nurses. I know he'll never wake up, but this is what my father would have wanted. Her name was Sarah. Not that anyone called her that, because Sarah knew it all. Sarah was good at math and English, art and history. Sarah knew that the sun was a star and not a planet. Sarah knew how babies were made. Most of all, Sarah knew what happened when people died. Because Sarah, at one point, had died too. Sarah talked about a before and after, a before Sarah, but she did not talk about this much. But Sarah did talk about other things. Sarah talked about hiking in beautiful places, about swimming with such colorful fish. Sarah also talked about less interesting topics, like politics, Little Sarah talked like an adult sometimes. But for someone so smart, some teachers did not like her. Especially Miss Nellie. Sometimes Miss Nellie would stare at Sarah, and Sarah would stare back. The other children would be much too focused on their books, or too focused on chatting with each other to notice. But there were often moments like those, moments of tension and an unsettling connection between the two. But what everyone did notice is that Miss Nellie did not like Sarah. Miss Nellie was often cold and rude to little Miss Know-It-All, tight-lipped, tensed, and never offering a smile. Miss Nellie routinely refused to look at little Sarah in the eye. But on the rare times she did, Miss Nellie seemed to look away immediately, with an anguished and fearful look in her aged face. Because little Miss Know-It-All knew it all, and Sarah knew Nellie Osborne's secret. Miss Nellie knew about before Sarah. Miss Nellie knew about the broken body her troubled son put in the water. Miss Nellie had helped him bury the body. That spoon floated atop the calm waters of the lake near the Osborne's home. She helped bury a woman, but now returned was a child. A child who on her first day of class with Miss Nellie said to her, "I know exactly what you did." I love my husband, and I know he loves me. It's there everywhere I look, from the moment I wake to his sleep-softened smile, and his fingertips tracing my jawline, to the post-its he leaves around the house when he's at work. Silly sweet notes that make me smile. It's in the text that he says he always thinks of me, the solid warmth of his arms when he comes home, and the tenderness in his eyes, the little presents he brings home, earrings, hair clips, once even a bracelet of pearls glowing like the moon. I never thought I'll find someone like him, someone who never shouts or who doesn't leave bruises, who doesn't mind if the house isn't spotless or if I've put on 5 pounds. He doesn't call me useless or go through my phone when I'm asleep, searching for evidence that I'm having an affair with every man I've ever met. Oh, he's not perfect, I know. I've seen the lipstick smudges on his shirt, the fading scratches on his skin, once even a bite mark. I know there's some things I just can't give him, but it makes what we have all the more special. There'll never be the woman who shares his life, who's waiting for him at home, who he can't live without. The one he admits he's always thinking of, whenever he's with them. I know they're nothing to him, really. So when he comes home late, worn out and sweat-drenched, I kiss him hello and put his clothes in the washing machine while he showers away the grime. Make sure the dinner's hot and ready for him. Sympathize with the stories about his awful boss. Pack his lunch and set out his clothing for tomorrow. Find a space for the silver necklace in his collection. Take off the laundry and make sure the bloodstains are gone from his favorite shirt. Make sure the bins are put out before they start to smell. And when he holds me in his arms each night, I am so thankful to be the one he chooses to share his life with. Last week, I was sitting in a bar in the West End of Boston when I noticed a strange man. At first view, he seemed like your normal 30-year-old male. Brown hair, subtle beard, wearing a grey raincoat. He sat next to me and offered to buy me a drink. I refused politely and asked him why. Surprised, he said,
"Don't you remember me, Matthew?"
I was startled. How could this man know my name?
"We were best friends when we were younger. We grew up just a few blocks from here and went to the same school. I'm John."
I scanned his face closely. He did seem quite familiar. Maybe what he was saying was true. Maybe John was my long-lost childhood best friend. So I pretended to recognize him, and we spent the rest of the night talking about our past. In the weeks following, John was very present in my life. We had coffee in the morning and went out for beer on the weekend. This was new for me, since as long as I could remember, I had been more of the loner type. I never had any close friends before John, and maybe it was true, we had known each other before. One night, we were having dinner, like on most Fridays, but John seemed different this time. He was acting distant and a bit colder than usual. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he had to show me something. I followed him outside towards my neighbor's house. Mary was a young widow living with her 2 sons alone since her husband died in a railroad accident. John climbed the window to Mary's house and signaled for me to join him, which I did hesitantly. We opened the window and stepped inside the empty living room. It was late, so they must be in bed, I thought.
"In the kitchen, left to the sink, there's a drawer. You will open that drawer and take the sharpest knife you find,"
said John. I was confused, but did it anyways. John dragged me upstairs and pointed me towards a door. I opened it to find Mary, sound asleep in her bed.
"Slit her throat,"
said John. I shook my head in disgust. "No,"
"Slit her throat,"
ordered John more fiercely. I felt like I wasn't in control of my body anymore. My shaking hand grasped the knife tightly as I approached the sleeping Mary. It has been 2 weeks since John pushed me to murder Mary and her 2 young boys. The police haven't found me yet, and I haven't seen John since then. I finally resolved to call my father and ask him about my supposed best friend. I asked him if he remembered anything about a friend named John from when I was younger. My dad turned, looked at me, smiled, and said, "Yes, I do remember John. He was your imaginary best friend." It's inside all of us. You may not believe this, but I work for the government. I have worked on a top secret project for over 30 years. The knowledge of what we have been doing has been slowly eating away at me, and I've realized that I have to tell someone before it's too late. I picked this platform and channel because I feel you people might believe me. Anyways, I digress. About 2040 years ago, the Egyptians ruled. You may have heard of their immortal pharaohs and animal-like gods. This sounds ridiculous, I know, but people used to live forever. When anyone else reached a certain age, roughly 30 or 40, the pharaohs killed them off, so as to avoid competition for the throne. At about the same time, a small meteor hit Earth. Despite only leaving a small crater, it left a very big impact on human history. It bore an alien plague from the Kuiper belt. It quickly spread across the earth. Millions died within weeks. The plague still exists. You may think that it has been eradicated by now, but you would be mistaken. It's inside all of us. It is eating away your cells, mutating them and spreading like a cancer. Throughout the last couple thousand years, it has changed and mutated, optimizing itself for maximum survival. It's inside all of us. It spreads faster in some people than others, from the day you are born until the day you die. Most people don't know why you die of old age. Some people say it is just because your body is tired and worn out. It's not. As I said earlier, you should be immortal. But as the plague eats away at you, it gives you wrinkle and makes your hair turn gray because of the stress on your body. When the mutation is about to happen, you are bedridden. You then die of old age. You don't. If you were allowed to live a few days longer, you would turn. The plague would take hold, and as your body fell apart, you would attempt to kill everything you could see. When you are near that phase, you are killed. A government operative would turn off your life support while no one was in the room, or provide a faulty IV drip laced with untraceable toxins. You wouldn't reach the chain. My job is to kill. I'm based at the hospital in New York, and when anyone is about to turn, I have and will kill them. No one will notice, and the world will remain safe. Just remember that as you're lying in your deathbed, I'll be coming for you soon. I grew up in a family of 4. I told this to the therapist, but she doesn't understand me. She simply nods and taps her pen against her notebook, as if waiting for me to divulge. But I have already told her the most important thing about me. Brother? Sister? She says casually, looking directly at me.
Sister,
I say.
she isn't as nice as she looks.
The therapist chuckles and angles her knee to match mine. Mirroring. I've read all about it. It's manipulative. Sorry to hear that, she says. Sometimes it's much harder for us to like our siblings than it is others to do so.
She killed 36 men and women over her lifetime.
I say.
Still like her?
The therapist cringes, but only for a moment, as she dashes a note onto a white page. Your mother and father?
Terrible people.
I'm noticing a pattern.
My sister's abrupt, whereas mom and dad are skilled in torture. When you hear the screams, you'll wish my sister had the job.
The therapist writes notes, enough to fill half a page. I think we're going to reduce your endoxy before next session.
And the murders?
She rests a hand on my knee and offers a sad smile. Let's park those for today.
Today. Today's all we have.
I want to know more about you, she says. I understand you might feel conflicted about all of this.
I don't.
I'm sorry?
Sister kills. My parents play. Different strokes.
Surely
And then there's me. Lucky number 4. The thoughtful one. Well, I try to be.
I'm sorry. I shrug.
I let my marks get to know me before they die.
She gasps. I smile.
Exactly. I love the look of horror as it all comes together.
didn't kill Amanda. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to, but I didn't. The moment I saw my wife of 11 years having sex with some asshole in our own bed, something snapped. The dresser was next to me, and the bed on the opposite side of the room. I knew I could pull out my gun from the top drawer and nail them both onto the bed before either of them could open their filthy mouths to blur out some pathetic excuse onto why I should spare these little shits who ruined a perfectly happy marriage. But I didn't. I'm not that kind of man. Instead, I let the son of a bitch go and haven't spoken to my wife since. A few days later, I opened the door to a police officer who asked me questions about Amanda. Apparently, she was reported missing by her mother, who repeatedly tried and failed to reach her phone. I hadn't seen her for 3 days at the time, and honestly, I didn't care. This cheating bastard probably deserved whatever happened to her. I spent the next few weeks with interrogations and court trials. They seemed to have no doubt as to who was the culprit. Can't blame them after all. It would have been awfully convenient for the murderer to be the victim's ex-husband. People in law enforcement probably see the same case every other week. Luckily, there wasn't enough evidence to convict me. The whole process was soul-crushing. Months spent trying to convince people that I didn't murder the love of my life, while staring at the obvious disbelief in their eyes. I wish I had killed her. It would have been much simpler for everyone, but I didn't. No matter how angry I was, I could never do that to her. Today, as I write this, it's been exactly a year since I caught her red-handed. I miss Amanda so much, but everyone seems to have forgotten about her. I would too, if not for the fact that I still have her presence. She's still with me. I can see her. Some nights I can hear her crying, as if apologizing to me for the things she has done. At least that's how I like to see it. Sometimes she screams, making me jump out of the bed in panic. Usually, a broken finger or a rib is enough to shut her up. Sometimes she feels like resisting, and I have to bring out the knife. Oh, the horror in her eyes. She has always been frail, so I don't have to flay her a lot before she passes out. Then, I change the duct tape she chewed through with a fresh one, and go right back to my cozy bed. You see, I told you, I didn't kill Amanda. I could have shot her the moment I walked into that room, but I didn't. And I make sure that every day she wishes that I had.
My son's voice doesn't echo. It's true. His voice doesn't have an echo. He was around 4 years old when we noticed it. We had been at the park playing. On our way home, we passed through a tunnel. I've always found echoes very funny, so I shouted some nonsense really loud. It bounced back right away. It made my son giggle. He shouted something, but it didn't bounce back. It was all flat. I looked at my wife. She didn't seem to notice. "Come on, buddy. Try again. Louder," I said to him. He did, but it made no difference. His voice didn't echo. I found it quite odd, but we didn't talk more about it. That night, my wife locked herself in the bathroom for hours. I could hear her sobbing in there, but she wouldn't let me in. The years passed. My wife decided to homeschool our son. Since she was a teacher, I didn't argue with her on it. Other kids can be cruel, she said as we discussed different educational options. I know what's best for him, she insisted. Our son didn't have any friends. My wife was sort of overprotective of him. He only spent time with us. He was an only child. Me and my wife had difficult time conceiving, leading us in on IVF treatments. After some excruciating months, we finally found out that she was pregnant. 9 months later, he was born. It wasn't just that his voice didn't echo that made him different. One night, when we practiced his reading skills, I started making shadow figures on the wall. I made various animals. My son thought it was hilarious, and he wanted to try as well. I helped form his grip into a figure and placed his hand in front of the lamp. I gasped. Nothing. My son did not have a shadow. This couldn't be real. I knocked on the bathroom door to tell my wife my latest discovery. She was in there again. She had been crying a while ago, just like every other night the past years. Now all I heard was silence. I called her, asking if everything was okay. No answer. I got up and grabbed a screwdriver. After minutes of struggling, I finally managed to get the door open. I found my wife lying in our bathtub. The water was dyed red from her cuts. Beside her laid a small note. It read, "To my husband, forgive me. I can't continue living this lie. Our son is dead. He died of cancer when he was 2. Your doctor told me it was your way of coping with the loss, and that it would go away, but it never did. You still believe that he exists. It breaks my heart to pretend that he's with us every day. I can't live with it anymore. I'm sorry." "Do you think Scream is a good horror movie?" he asked. Despite how calmly he delivered that question, I still couldn't stop my lips from quivering. "Yes." He clicked his tongue and walked slowly towards where I was sitting. The wooden floor clapped at each step. He stopped behind me and gently placed his hands over my shoulders. "I think so too. It's enough to keep you on your toes, but it's enjoyable in the sense that it is self-aware." He then started to slowly massage my shoulders. "Sorry for such a random question. Just trying to calm your nerves." He paused. "Have you heard of creepypastas?" I read some of them." "That's very nice." He went beside me and gently grabbed my right hand and placed it on the keyboard. He caressed it while doing so, which led him to notice I was sweating. A lot of people write creepy stories in the internet every day. They post it on their vlogs, Facebook, Reddit, he exclaimed, as if he was trying to get me excited. "Do you think anybody could write a good horror story?" "I think so." He chuckled while placing my left hand on top of the keyboard. "So why are you so nervous? You paid top dollar for this sick opportunity. No one will be able to write a horror story like this." A loud buzzer came, and the room behind the glass in front of me lit up, revealing a rusty interior with glistening dashes of red. 2 men walked in and waved at both of us like friendly neighbors. They carried away the lifeless dark lumps of meat that were once human beings. The last writer must have been very specific in his descriptions. A few minutes later, the same man dragged 4 strangers into the middle of the room. The glass was thick, but it wasn't thick enough to block out their collective screaming and pleading. "Relax," and try to stick to your story as much as possible. He snaps his fingers and points at the keyboard. He then lit a cigarette. The smell of it actually helped put me at ease. Showed me that anybody could write a good horror story. I took a deep breath and typed. "Looking good, Juliet," I shouted, pointing at her while I chugged down my third cup of the night. Things were definitely getting excited at the party. The music was getting loud, and everyone was jumping to the rhythm. People were greeting me from left to right, calling me out Tom, with some variations like Tommy, Tomster, and the most ridiculous would be from Mark, calling me Tomato Man because of how red I get at the end of the night. It's a large party, if I must say. I only come around once or twice a month, but still, a lot of people would remember my name and keep calling me the life of the party. Moving to another town is pretty rough, but this party is the only thing worth staying for here. From what I heard, the party already has an average of 300,000 partygoers every night. I know it's a lot. This party isn't even advertised or dipped in heavy marketing, but I guess it's because it's pretty popular underground. I wouldn't be able to earn the title Life of the Party with just a pretty smile, of course. The management knew I was bringing lots of friends. I think I've invited over 50 of my friends inside, and they may not have liked me dragging them, but keeping these wonderful festivities all to myself would just be a crime. As I was walking around greeting my friends, out of nowhere a light shined into my face. I was being blinded by someone from outside. "Hey!" the lady shouted. The music stopped. I walked towards her, but she kept shining her flashlight, so I tripped over Juliet's tombstone. "You shouldn't be here at this time of night." She raised her voice again. Everyone was booing. They all looked at me, expected me to handle the situation. I walked towards my bag and pulled out the pistol. Looks like it's time to send out another invitation. "So you have to light the candle after you turn off the lights, otherwise it won't work." "Yeah, Katie, I know," Andy whispered huffily. "Then get in there," Katie said, shoving Andy towards the bathroom. Andy walked inside and closed the door, ignoring the giggles of the girls outside. She shook her head and walked over to the sink. This was dumb. She didn't even want to be here, but her mom and Katie's were close friends, so she always had to accept whatever birthday or slumber party Katie was forced to extend. And now, here she was at yet another sleepover, playing Katie's newest obsession, summoning the Shadow Man. Andy wasn't sure what the difference was between the Shadow Man, Candyman, or any of the spirits summoned through a mirror. Probably nothing. She sighed and turned off the lights, lighting the candle. "Ready?" The giggling outside intensified before slowly quieting down. Then the chanting started. "Shadow Man, Shadow Man, Shadow Man. He hates the day, he hates the day. Shadow Man, Shadow Man, Shadow Man. Come out and play." As each verse ended, their voices grew louder, more expectant. Andy began counting. They were supposed to chant 4 times and then knock, inviting the Shadow Man in. That was the theory, anyways. "Shadow Man, Shadow Man, Shadow Man. He hates the day." They were almost yelling now. Andy gripped the candle and waited. One more verse to go. Despite herself, she was actually growing nervous. She knew it was nonsense, but standing in the dark, looking at her wide-eyed reflection, distorted by the flame, Andy felt a shiver run down her spine. "Shadow Man, Shadow Man, come out and play!" The girls finished before there was a loud knock on the door. Andy held her breath and waited. Outside was completely silent. She leaned forward a bit as the candle wavered. Surely that was just her imagination. Another knock rang through the bathroom. Andy yelped and jumped back. Now the knocks were more like bangs, quick and insistent. Dropping the candle, Andy began to twist the door handle, but it was to no use. It would not open. "Guys, this isn't funny. Let me out," Andy begged, trying to fight back tears. A pair of hands reached out from behind and grabbed her. Andy screamed, throwing all her weight against the door, crashing out to raucous laughter. Scared and confused, she looked behind her to see the shower curtain flung wide open from where she had been hiding. "That's not funny," Andy shouted, pushing away from everyone. Come on, don't wait yourself," Katie chuckled. "Besides, you should have seen your face. Priceless." Andy stopped, her shoulder hunched, shivering. The other girls brushed past her back to the living room, unconcerned. As Katie walked by, she glanced over at Andy and stopped. She was smiling, but it was more of a grimace than a smile. "Andy? No hard feelings, yeah?" Katie said nervously. A shadow passed over Andy's face as she looked up into Katie's eyes. "Of course not. Now come on.
Let's go play."
On April 15th, the Robertsons died in a car accident. On September 19th, the Robertsons woke up. To Melissa and her daughter Joyce, the news that they'd been killed in a flaming wreck of twisted metal after a head-to-head collision on an intersection came as quite a shock. The kind of thing that would perhaps cause a certain level of unpleasant psychological distress if left unchecked. Their husband and father, the famed geneticist Dr. Ernest Robertson, was sure to ease them gently into it. "I was able to reconstruct your memories almost exactly," he said. "Save your crash, of course. That's something you're probably better off forgetting. But otherwise, you're good as new. Just leave it all to me." Dr. Robertson had done an impeccable job reconstructing his wife and child exactly how he wanted to remember them, drawing full, living human beings out of the smallest strands of DNA. A lifetime achievement that redefined science as we knew it, and things were perfect for a while. Even though the two of them had no real, tangible awareness of the deaths they'd experienced, Joyce and Melissa found a new appreciation for the life Dr. Robertson had given them. They carried themselves with a keen awareness of the fact that everything they had, they owed to him. They were grateful. They were happy. It was a terrible shame, then, when Melissa and Joyce began to disappoint Dr. Robertson. Sometimes, when Dr. Robertson told Joyce it was time to go to bed, she'd be petulant. Sometimes, when Dr. Robertson wanted some peace and quiet, she'd insist on making noise. Melissa, too, would ask questions she shouldn't have been asking, about gaps in her memory, about tiny inconsistencies here and there that did not seem to add up. She just kept tugging at the little threads on the edges of the perfect life Dr. Robertson had so generously stitched together for them. It was when Melissa found a photograph of herself before the crash, she assumed, where she had a face that seemed ever so slightly different. Fuller cheeks, darker eyes, a rounder chin, that the good doctor decided enough was enough. Dr. Robertson thought Melissa and Joyce were being ungrateful, so one morning he took a revolver out of his desk drawer and shot them both through the forehead while they slept. When the bodies stopped twitching, he dragged them out of bed and threw them on the pile. Shame, terrible shame, Dr. Robertson thought, as he made 2 notes in his journal. Less curious, more obedient. 10th time's the charm, he said, as he got back to work. On November 6th, the Robertson died in a car crash, as far as they're aware. On January 3rd, the Robertsons woke up. "You're a murderer," the scrawny-looking man said. "I know you did it." I scowled. I was just about to sleep when my neighbor decided to start spouting his usual bullshit. "Look, man," I said, "can we skip this crap? I have no idea what you're talking about, and I just want to sleep." A lie, of course, but I wanted that idiot gone. I closed the door, but my neighbor blocked it with his foot. "You murderous freak," he spat. "I can smell the blood on your hands." I blinked. "Are you stupid? I told you 1,000,000,000 times. I'm not a serial killer." He did not believe me. He never did. "Look, I'm going to sleep." I pushed my neighbor away and shut the door close. I groaned and went back to my bed. "Fucking neighbor," I muttered. I fell asleep half an hour later, only to wake up to someone banging on my door. I opened my eyes and found my walls painted red. The police charged into my house and found me in the middle of a pile of cut limbs. Blood was sprayed all over my walls. I was shell-shocked when the police arrested me. An anonymous call was made that night. Someone had seen me dragging suspicious bags into my house, the size of a person. The police decided to check it and found me in my bedroom, surrounded by body parts and blood all over. I tried to explain that I was innocent, and when they found the bone saw with my DNA on it, hidden underneath the floor, the jury had made its decision. As I was drafted to prison, I saw my neighbor in the crowd that had gathered outside the court hall. As I passed him, he whispered, "Rot in jail, you psycho." He had this insane look in his eyes, and as I was dragged away from him, I screamed, all the while staring at the red stains on his boots.
Do it.
The news had told us that it was just like in the movies and comic books. The dead had risen and were eating the living. But these weren't like the ones in the comic books. They were smart. They knew how to get around. They knew how to plan. They knew where to look. I lied when I told her that it was all fake.
Do it.
It started in South America, but it was quickly spreading through Europe, Asia, and the rest of the continent. Before we knew it, Mexico was gone, and the US military was defending the border. But they were running out of people. One less soldier for us meant one more for them. I lied when I told her there was no way we could get in.
Do it.
County by county, state by state, they ravaged it all. Internet, gone. Phone lines, gone. Communication, gone. We decided to stay at home and secure it as much as possible, since we had no idea where else to go. I lied when I told her the door could hold. "Do it, Jacob," she whispered. I can't, I answered, crying as quietly as possible. You said you would, you promised. I hear them walking in our living room, going through our stuff. There must be at least 30, and it sounds like some are making their way upstairs. Please, she whispered again. One for me, one for you. Then it'll be over. They were at our doorstep now, trying to open it. I looked at the gun in my hand. All those lies I told her. I just wish I hadn't lied about how many bullets we had left. It happened without a warning. 1 hour, the world was normal. The next, it was lighter. The rich, powerful, and famous were gone. Politicians from the nation's governments, high-end businessmen, professional athletes, Hollywood, huge chunks of the military. Poof, gone. It didn't take long for the rest of us to notice. Once we did, the conspiracy theories began in earnest. In the first days following, the loudest voices were giving airtime on local news nations, screaming that the elite knew something we didn't. We dismissed those warnings. It seemed preposterous that they would simply abandon the vast majority of mankind. We tried to pick up the pieces in their absence, but it was hard at first. So many of the integral pieces of our infrastructure were gone, after all. New elections were held under the guidance of professors and retired government workers, and reserves banded together with what remained of the militaries. All of this progress almost didn't happen, though. A week after the Great Disappearance, while the world was still chaos, a video played on every internet-connected device across the planet. The world's leaders were its star, sitting at a long table and wearing somber expressions. What they had done, they said, was the hardest decision mankind would ever have to make. An alien race was on its way to Earth, and it was on a warpath. The governments of the world had an estimated arrival date, and knew the action had to be taken. The action, they decided, was to ensure the future of the species by saving what they could of it. Of course, that happened to only include the rich and powerful. Our sacrifice wouldn't be in vain, though, they said. Humanity will remember our bravery forever. And with that, they left us to our fate. This reveal threatened to send the disorder of the world into pure chaos. But the invaders arrived before that could happen. We braced ourselves for the fight. Even though it was a fight we would surely lose. The fight never happened. They did not bring war, but a second chance. They had been monitoring us for hundreds of years, and they finally did not like what they saw. Theorizing that the current leaders of our world would abandon us if given a doomsday scenario, the aliens made themselves known to our governments. They were coming to destroy us, they said, and our leaders responded exactly as predicted. The moment they left Earth in their pods, the aliens slaughtered them. They left us, survivors, to our own devices for a week, and then came to offer us support in our rebuilding efforts. This support did not come in any form of fancy alien tech or advanced form of government, though. Their approach, beyond the culling of our elite, was mostly hands-off. No, the help they provided was motivational, in the form of graphic footage of their dispatching of our leaders. We got the message loud and clear. Do better next time. The world unanimously agreed we would certainly try. We need to talk about the kid. Mom speaks to Dad. Billy is sitting between his father and his mother, thinking it's unusual for his mom to talk in such a monotonous tone. He does not say a word, because he has learned over the years that it is not wise to talk when Mom and Dad are talking. In fact, not to talk at all is the only wise choice for Billy in this household. What? Dad expressed his lack of patience in just one word. Dad is always good at expressing anger, sometimes by words, and sometimes by fists, seasoned with a belt or two, and occasionally by a pair of Oxfords if Dad miraculously gets a job interview that day. Billy thinks to himself, almost bursts out into laughter. It is an unusual sense of humor for a 16-year-old boy to have. But Billy's life is never usual, and he has also been through a lot more than a 16-year-old should have had. Don't want me. If you had spent more time with the kid, I wouldn't have been called to the principal's room again. Also, it's my fault now that the kid is running around school breaking stuff, hurting other students. Dad's voice is getting louder with every word. Billy wants to tell them that his name is Billy and not the kid, but he restrains this urge to avoid the beating he will get if he opens his mouth. He forgets he won't be beaten again, not anymore. Of course, it's your fault. I'm always the one that puts food on the table. What have you done for this family? Normally, Dad will fire back with another insult, then begins to beat up Mom. Just another Wednesday night in Billy's home. But that is not happening, because Billy is bored of role-playing now. He withdraws his hands from his parents' cold lips. His thumbs are sore from arching up and down constantly, trying to make their mouths move. Billy rests his back against the chair and gazes at what is in front of him, as if he is looking at the greatest piece of art he has ever seen before. Arms draping like broken branches towards the ground. There are little streams of dry blood on Dad's left arm. They come from the gashes on his throat. Mom doesn't have much blood on her body because the fork is still buried deep inside her neck. For the first time in his life, Billy feels relieved. He feels free. He decides to do something only grown-ups are allowed to do in this house. He laughs. My light bulb in my bathroom went out this morning. I was getting ready for work when it just flickered off. Fucking hell, I muttered. I added light bulbs to my mental shopping list before continuing my morning routine. Luckily, the sun had just risen, so I had just enough light to continue without a hitch. I would have to stop by the store on the way home. Right before my shift ended, a family of 6 came in and almost ate us out of business. Left a hell of a mess, too. The sun had set almost an hour ago. Naturally, I forgot the light bulbs on the journey home. Fuck it, I thought. Tomorrow was another day. I was exhausted from being on my feet and could think of nothing better than a hot shower and my soft bed. I got home and locked the door immediately behind me, a custom for this part of the city. I thought of what I could use in place of electrical lightning and picked my phone's flashlight. It was bright enough to just peek over the curtain of my shower, casting a shadow on top of my curtain on the rest of the shower. Since I lived alone, there was no point of closing the door. So I took my clothes off and stepped into the tub. As I rinsed my hair, free of shampoo, I saw a shadow move across the ceiling. I froze. My mind began running a mile a minute. Was it the shower curtain moving because I bumped it, perhaps? Or maybe the water, or an insect had moved past the flashlight. I stared at the ceiling without moving a muscle. Just as I began to calm down, believing the logical reasons I'd listed in my head, it moved again. This time, I could clearly make out a human head. Jesus fuck, this is how I'm gonna die, naked and afraid. Okay, remember what Josh from the kitchen staff told you. Strike and run out the door. I replayed these words in my head. If it's from behind, aim low. It's most likely a man, and you have to hit him where it hurts. In front, go for the eyes. Use your elbow. It's strong and hard. And don't panic. This is only going to slow you down. I waited for what felt like hours, but I'm counting the seconds. It's been 486 seconds since it last moved. The shower's beginning to get cold. I think he knows I saw him. Another 143 seconds. He clears his throat. I almost throw up. I know that shower's cold, darling. Your water heater's very small. I can hear the smile in his voice. The floor creaks from the other side. I see his silhouette reaching for the curtain. When I told my parents I was pregnant, of course, their first question was, who is the father? Truthfully, I don't know. I remembered snippets of the night. A man with a long beard and heavy metal tattoos. And I've been on every flavor of narcotic at the time, and I couldn't remember much else. So they shipped me off to my aunt's house to birth my shameful love child in secret. It was a quaint lakeside cottage with picket fence and neatly lined purple flowers. My own personal hell. Aunt Rue was a kind old lady who baked date squares and brewed chamomile. She made me feel welcome in her home, but she also liked to invite her bridge friends over to ogle me. They asked about my diet and recommended herbal concoctions to aid with my pregnancy pains. They stared relentlessly at my bulging stomach, almost hungrily, always waiting to feel the baby kick or gather in a silent prayer circle around me. He's going to be a very special boy, Aunt Rue declared, somehow having determined its gender. It skeeved me out, but I endured it, even when Aunt Rue suggested I forgo a hospital birth and instead entrust her friends to deliver the baby. Little chance of that happening, but I smiled and nodded away. As the pregnancy progressed, I began to suffer strange blackout spells. I would be lying on the couch, then awaken in my bedroom upstairs, with no memory of the in-between. Aunt Rue suggested my growing uterus was putting pressure on blood vessels in my brain, causing the blackouts. Google confirmed her diagnosis. But I also began having nightmares. Vivid, terrifying nightmares. Remixing elements of my daily tedium. Aunt Rue, her bridge friends, even my mysterious baby daddy were gathered around me, chanting as I laid naked on some sort of altar, surrounded by melting candles, leather-bound books, and the severed hoofs and heads of black-bearded goats. Everyone I spoke to, my parents, girlfriends back home, doctors, all asked the same question. Who is the father? But Aunt Rue and her friends hadn't asked once. almost as if they already knew. I recalled the image I had retained of the father, covered in tattooed pentagrams. So I left, withdrew some cash, and drove aimlessly for several hours, until I found a nondescript motel to check into. I figured I'd lay low until the baby was born, then apologize by phone to Aunt Rue. For once, I slept fine. But when I awoke the next morning, I found a note had been laid on the pillow beside me, with a simple message scribbled in Aunt Rue's handwriting. "When we want him," the note said, "we will take him." I laid poolside, perfecting my tan for the start of school next month. Mom was in the kitchen, cooking her famous fettuccine alfredo, and Dad was on his way home with a movie from Redbox. My life was perfect, but everything was about to change with the arrival of a new neighbor next door. He was a former police officer, probably mid-50s. Possessed a firm drill sergeant-like tone, but was very friendly and talkative. Initially, he seemed like a good fit for the neighborhood. He was cordial, always made an effort to wave or say hi, and the presence of someone with a law enforcement background provided a sense of security. But things began to unravel quickly, and the catalyst seemed to be me. My neighbor took a sudden and keen interest in me. Whenever I went outside, I could feel his eyes examining me. He would always wander over and try to start conversations with me. But as soon as he heard or saw my parents, he would leave. He asked me if I had any social media accounts, which I lied and said no. He asked if he could take a picture of me and proceeded to snap a pic before I could reply. I felt completely unnerved and frightened about his intentions for me. For all I knew, we could have had murderers or pedophiles living a mere feet from our home. I knew I needed to delve deeper, so one night I aimed my telescope at his window, and what I saw only amplified the alarm bells going off in my head. This man was fixated on a picture of me on his phone, and I could even see a small stack of photos on his nightstand, a young girl's image on top. My blood ran cold, as this all but confirmed my fear. He must be a pedophile. The next night, I saw him sneakily rummaging through our trash can. I watched in horror and disbelief as he removed my used tampon, got into his car, and sped off in the night. This was the final straw. I knew that in the morning I would have to alert my parents and get in contact with the police. I woke to the sound of police sirens and a loud commotion downstairs. I hopped out of bed and saw my parents being taken away in handcuffs. I started screaming and crying as I rushed towards the door, but I was stopped by the neighbor. With a horrified expression, he muttered, "I'm so sorry. Those are not your real parents. You were kidnapped and missing for the past 14 years. DNA test just confirmed it." I live alone upstairs with little to no possessions. I've always believed in a minimalistic life, and the few things that I have that are absolute necessities, I am borrowing from others. Every day I leave to run around town, and I always do my best not to disturb the guy downstairs. I'm really not a people's person, and I don't want to meet him. I don't think he wants to meet me either. The past few nights, when I've returned home, I've noticed things out of place. As I said, I don't have any possessions, so when they are out of place, it is easy to notice. I keep inspecting the room for misplaced items, and that's when I see all the proof that I need. A little surveillance camera in the corner. I wouldn't have noticed it if it wasn't for the red light showing that it was recording currently. Instantly, my gut drops. What kind of a sick freak would watch me like that? All I've ever wanted was to be left alone. Is that much to ask? With all the thoughts going through my head, I try to collect myself. I'll have to find somewhere else to live, and last time I moved, it took me forever to find a new place. I didn't want to stay here anymore, but I didn't want to be homeless either. I could hear footsteps coming from the stairs now. I reached down into my pocket for the knife that I've always kept on me, the one possession that was really mine. I hid behind the door, waiting for whoever was coming up the stairs to open the door. When he finally opened it, I plunged the knife deep. He struggled to stay up, but this wasn't my first rodeo. After the struggle was over, he was close to death. I pulled his wallet out and took the cash that was in there. With a sad look on his face, he asked me who I was and what I was doing in his attic. I plunged the knife into him, making sure he was dead. Time to find a new place. My neighbor is up to something. I know it. It took me a while to notice anything was off. After all, we live in a nice neighborhood, away from the city, in an area described as upper middle class. But as time went by, odd little patterns began to emerge. For one thing, he's never at block parties. For another, the guy won't even talk to me, other than a curt nod or a quick hello. And sure, one could argue that he is antisocial, or that he doesn't like me specifically, despite the fact that I go out of my way to be friendly to everyone. But that wouldn't explain the time I caught him staring at me through the window, or how I've noticed him following me when I go to work or to the grocery store. I try to convince myself that I'm being paranoid, but last week I'm positive he broke in while I was gone. I'd been out for only 15 minutes when I realized I'd left my jacket, so I turned the car around to go pick it up. When I stepped inside though, something felt off. Nothing was out of place, but something felt off. Plus, there was a scuff mark near the back door that I know was not there before. Confronting him would be the wrong move, which is why I'll wait until I see him pull out of the driveway, then sneak into his backyard and slip in through the back door. It's locked, but if I do find anything, then a broken door would be the least of my worries. Walking into his living room, I see I was right. It's the house of someone clearly unstable. Pictures everywhere. Most of them, people's faces with large X's slashed in red. The rest are of me, cooking, stuck at a red light, wiping sweat off my face in the garden. I swallow. Some of these pictures were taken last year, months before he moved in. Keys rattle in the lock as I hear noises by the front door. I look outside and see his car in the driveway. Panicking, I jump through the first door available, which turns out to be a closet, as my neighbor walks in and shuts the door. I hear the footsteps in the hall as he gets closer to my hiding place, and then he opens the closet. Whatever he expected to find, my naked body clutching a butcher knife clearly was not one of them. A scream escapes his lips before blood spills from his mouth. My knife plunging again and again and again into his body. Finally, after what feels like ages, but in reality was only about 12 minutes, I compose myself and begin cleaning up. How this man managed to track me down, let alone how he knew about all of my other victims, would have to come later. Picking up his feet to drag him away, though, I smiled. I knew he'd been up to something. The front door slams shut. I know the sound too well. I listen for all the good or bad signs. I hear muffled laughter and giggling. These are the bad signs. I squint my eyes shut in my bed, hoping this passes. The noises get louder as they make their way from the front door down the hallway. It sounds like two teenagers, drunk and in love, about to experience a night of passion. But it's just my mother. She picked up another one-night stand from the bar, and she's probably drunk. She stumbles around the hallway, being as loud as possible, while telling her date to keep quiet. They are right outside my bedroom door. I feel dread as I close my eyes, praying to let me rest. I hear them open the door to her bedroom, then slam it shut. My mom tells him that he's going to wake the neighbors before they start making love. They go at it, and it's not quiet. Finally, I get up and kick my door angrily. I hear her bed stop squeaking. "What was that?" he says. "It's nothing," she coos. As the sex continues, I sit on my bed, rocking back and forth. The sex stops and the room is quiet. "I'm getting a drink," the man exclaims. Her bedroom door opens moments later. I hear him walking down the hallway. The silent sound of my mom crying can be heard. I walk up to my bedroom door and put my ear to it. I hear her whispering to herself. "I'm a terrible mother." She repeats it like a prayer, and the sobs comes out. I place my hand against the door. The man makes his way down the hallway, and I start backing away from the door. It swings open as he's standing there, looking right at me, before looking around my room. "Don't go there," my mom screams, as she gets out of bed. She storms into the hallway and tries pulling the man out of the entrance to my room. "Didn't realize you had a kid," he says. "I don't," she says, slurring her words. "She ran away a year ago, probably dead on the side of the road or something." She looks at me, but doesn't see me. Tears roll down her cheeks as she turns around. The man follows her, closing my bedroom door. I felt my eyelids getting heavy. The long stretch of road had an almost sedating effect on me. I had the heaters on, which was lulling me into a false sense of security. The kind you get when you're snuggled under a duvet on a cold wintry night. It's a long road. It wouldn't hurt to close my eyes for a second, I thought, as I began drifting into a sleepy slumber. That's when the car hit a speed bump, sending the car swerving to the other side of the road. That was a bloody close one, I thought to myself. I knew if I didn't find a place to pull in, I was going to kill someone. As I was driving, I noticed someone was walking in the middle of the road towards me. They had their hand outstretched in the direction they were going. As I got closer, I could see it was a woman. She was clearly in distress and appeared to have been in an accident. I slowed the car down to a snail's pace. "You're going to get hit by a car if you keep walking in the middle of the road," I shout out. "I can help you. What happened to you?" I asked, as she kept walking with her arm still outstretched. She was completely out of it. First, I thought she was on drugs. She just kept on walking, not even acknowledging me. "Were you in an accident?" I shouted, hoping to get her attention. I kept following her in the direction she was going, hoping she would tell me what had happened to her. That's when I noticed the baby blanket. "Were you in an accident with your baby?" I asked, as I became overwhelmed with concern. As she walked, she turned her head to me. She seemed like she was trying to say something, but the blood in her mouth kept her from saying anything. We kept walking for about 5 minutes. As we made our way up the road, I noticed something lying on the ground. As I got closer, I could see it was a person. I went in for a closer inspection, when, to my absolute horror, I discovered it was the same woman that led me here. And when I looked up from the body, the woman that led me here was gone. That's when I heard the cries of the baby in front of me. Her poor baby, I thought, as I heard him screaming from the ditch. I grabbed the child and carefully wrapped him in this blanket. He seemed unharmed, apart from the distress he must have been in. I made my way back to my car to get my cell phone and ring for help. As I got to my car, I noticed the front of it was all banged up, as if I had hit something. Blood was smeared across the dented metal. I put the baby in the safety of the back seat as I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911. My heart was racing as I waited for the operator to answer. 911, what's your emergency? Hello, yes, I think I killed someone. I just snapped and killed her. It all happened in a split of a second. She was nagging me and wouldn't stop. So I hit her to shut her up. "You're boring," she would say. "You never want to go anywhere. You're a loser, and it's your fault you never had any friends," was all she ever nagged me about. I had to listen to the same bullshit my whole life. We loved each other once. Maybe when we were kids. But when someone is stuck to you for so long, you start to resent them. I was never able to have my own life. Whenever I tried to assert my own independence, she was always there to nag me about it. Shelley was the attractive twin. She was everyone's favorite. She could light up a room with her smile. I myself wasn't much to look at. But one thing I had going for me was my fantastic figure, and it drove Shelley mad that I was in control of it. Being twins, me and Shelley had spent our entire lives together. I loved her with all my heart, but I just couldn't take any more. All I wanted was to live my own life. And after bashing her brains out, I finally got what I wanted. She was starting to stink, and I was starting to worry about what kind of effect this would have on me. I hadn't thought this far before I hit her. I couldn't just cover her up and make excuses. The smell was enough of a giveaway. I couldn't say she just died or slipped and fell. In the end, I decided to just hand myself in and own up to my mistakes. Covered my sister with a cloth and made my way to the police station. As I approached the counter, the smell was enough to make the police officer on duty gag. "How can I help you?" the officer asked. "I killed my sister, and I'm here to hand myself in," I said as the attention of the officer was now fully on me. "Where did this take place?" he asked. "At home, where we live together." "And is her body still at the address?" he asked, looking at me as if I was mad. "No, you're looking at it. We share this body," I said as I removed the cloth covering Shelley, my conjoined twin's head. The officer fainted in front of me, and last I heard, he had to retire due to stress. The doctors didn't know what to do, and in the end, they were afraid to remove her in case they killed me as well. It was safer to keep her head attached to my body. All I ever wanted was to be free of her, and now I sit in a cell with nothing but her decomposed head perched on my shoulder, smiling at me. "Now remember, I don't want you talking to him unless I'm around. You hear?" "Yes, Dad. I'm serious. Now tuck in your shirt. He's here." The front door swung open, and there stood Uncle Tommy, drenched in sweat from a day's work in the summer's heat. "It's a scorcher out there, ain't it?" he said, putting his bag on the floor and untying his boots. "I appreciate you letting me crash for the night." "Just so long as you're gone in the morning," my dad replied coldly. "Of course." "Now," Uncle Tommy said, turning to me and lowering himself to a knee, "where's my hug at? Been a while since I seen you last." I took a couple of steps towards him and leaned in for a hug. His tight embrace made me uncomfortable, and I let out a light whimper. "Don't you know it's 100 degrees out there?" he asked, tugging at my long sleeves. "I haven't been outside today," I recited to him. "Don't you have some chores to finish up?" Dad interjected. I knew that was my cue to leave, so I shuffled off to my room. Later that night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to be comfortable, when I heard the thud of footsteps in the hallway outside my room. After several long seconds of silence, the door opened quietly. The dark silhouette of a man entered the room, and the door closed again. For several more seconds, there was nothing but unrelenting silence. I might have thought I had dreamt it all, if it weren't for the sound of a hushed breath being carefully released. I could feel him getting nearer. The warmth of another person in the room was unfamiliar at this hour. I was not prepared for this. I prayed he would go away, to even come back in the morning if he must. He reached down and touched me. He rolled me onto my stomach and lifted up my shirt. From the corner of my eye, I could see two things: the faint beam of a pocket flashlight and Uncle Tommy's eyes studying my bare skin. His rough fingers ran up and down my back. Suddenly, he got up, walked to the bedroom door, and left. I tried again to fall asleep, eventually succeeding. He was gone by the time I awoke. Around noon, the phone rang while my father was out. "Hello?" I answered. "Hey, buddy." "Uncle Tommy?" "Yeah, your dad around?" "No, sir. Went to the store." "Good," he said, his voice a bit shaky. He was silent for a moment. "I'm calling about last night. I don't know if you were awake or not." I was. "Well then, I'll just get right to it. I've got a question for you, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Where did you get all the bruises from?" It was a typical autumn afternoon. The sun was mellow, the wind was soft, and I was riding my bike blissfully down a deserted country road. "Hey mate," a man's voice ripped through my thoughts. I looked around. A grey van had pulled up alongside me, and the driver craned his neck over to me. "Do you know anyone named Carl Rillis?" "Karlrellies?" asked the driver. He smiled, baring his blindingly white teeth. A grey cat perched on top of his long, dark mane. "Oh no, sorry. I don't know. Do you know the name of the street? Maybe I could direct you there." I stammered. Still smiling, he said, "No worries," gave me a thumbs up and drove away. Bewildered, I watched as the grey van slowly disappeared around the bend. What was that about? Whatever, I shrugged and carried on. The sky was crimson by the time I decided to go home. The streets were empty as I rode through town. In the melancholic twilight, I suddenly saw it again. The grey van slowly approaching me. It was the same van and the same man. "Do you know anyone named Carl Rillis?" "Karlrellies?" The same question asked in the exact same way. I stared at his eerie, artificial smile in bewilderment. Surely he was not still looking and had forgotten our previous encounter. Overcome with emotions, I hysterically said, "No," then sped away. Looking back, I saw the grey van slowly turning around. After abruptly turning left, I shoved myself into a small alley. Between the terraced houses, I stood panting in the shadow, sweating from the effort and the fear. The grey van slowly drove past my hiding place. I held my breath, counted to 100, then, as stealthy as a cat, I sneaked out on my bike. To my great horror, the grey van was still at the top of the street. The driver was in conversation with another passerby. He asked the same question, as the passerby shook his head. I made a run for it. I got to my house and collapsed onto my sofa, trying to calm myself. I was safe. Clearly, there was something sinister about a man just driving around, asking every person he met about another strange person. Carl Rillis? That name was distinctive enough that he could have just gone straight to the police's office and get an answer. So why didn't he? And who was Carl Rillis? It sounded almost like the driver only wanted to know if I knew who the guy was. No more, no less. Curiosity got the better of me as I decided to Google the name. Immediately, I wished I didn't. Serial killer on the run, Carl Rillis. I looked at dozens of alarming news headlines, and there, on the page, with his long black mane and blinding white smile, the grey van driver looked back at me. The doorbell chimed.
I'm infected. You know what I'm infected with. You saw it on the news. The World Health Organization called it a pandemic the other day. I never thought it would infect me, but it did. Now, I don't know what to do. Unlike some people my age, I don't have a salary. I don't have any sick days. I used them all when I sprained my ankle in January. Brett says I need a doctor's note to get paid leave. You know, to make sure I'm not capitalizing on the paranoia to dodge shifts. He doesn't want to set a precedent. Problem is, I can't afford the bill. Sure, It's not a 100K heart attack bill. I know I need to self-quarantine, but I don't have any savings. But $175 for a checkup is almost half my week's pay. I can't pay rent if I don't go out and make rent money. You know what I need to do, but I'm not sure I have the stomach to do it. I check the clocks and down a Benelin shot. 45 minutes until my shift starts. Gotta get moving. Donning a medical mask, I broke quarantine. As I rode the bus, disease spewed from my mouth like a thick green fog. My noxious gases carried malicious little germs. A child looked up at me. Microscopic predators scurried across her skin, into her eyes and mouth. Soon, she too leaked green. I imagined her sick and dying. I imagined all the people her infernal vapors would infect. She smiled at me. Smile while you can, little one. Smile before the plague begins. Getting off the bus, I watched 1,000 subtle suicides. A man on a bench licked ketchup off his hand and began leaking green. A little boy sipped from a public fountain and began leaking green. A woman, already leaking, kissed her husband, regurgitating green into his mouth like a mother bird. I coughed. Bystanders recoiled. If they only saw what I could see, they would break down in tears. When I showed up at work, Brett yelled at me and told me to take off my mask. He told me I'm scaring away the customers while spitting leak like a toxic flamethrower. I protested, but he insisted. Just wash your hands, he said. It'll be fine, he said. I washed my hands, dirtying them again the second they touched my breath. By the time I'd gotten ready and clocked in, plague filled the building like a tainted hotbox. I thought about leaving. I thought about running away, but I didn't. Instead, I put on a smile and greeted my next victim. Welcome to Burger King. May I take your order?
It started 3 months ago, when a new student enrolled in our school. Our class advisor called her to introduce herself in front of the class. It was a few steps from her seat to the chalkboard, since she was at the front row, and yet, the taps she made with her wooden heels were rhythmic, soothing even. She was, by definition, the expected class hottie for the school year. Hello, my name is Myru. Nice to meet you all. The last thing everyone wanted her to have to accompany her raven hair, beautiful eyes, and porcelain skin was that voice. The only flaw I'd be able to squeeze off her is that she never smiles. It wasn't even a week before it started to happen. It was the first few minutes of our first class when our class advisor hesitantly stood in front. Class, it really saddens me to inform you that Max passed away last night by taking away his own life. Everyone in the classroom fell silent. Some silent sobs could be heard from the back of the room where Max was seated. Before we could even process what happened, our advisor took something from her bag. Myru, Max wanted to give you this love letter as his final wish. Myru stood up as we all looked at her, receiving the white envelope without a speck of emotion. Weeks after the first incident, 2 more from our class were reported dead, both by suicide. Louis and Patricia were already acting strange before they died. Both had an insane crush on Myru, but never really approached her. As the school year passed by, Myru continued to attract more admirers, all claiming to be in love with her smile. None of them eat, sleep, or study well. The strangest thing is that I've personally never seen her but with one blank expression on her face. Another thing is that they never attempt to approach her, just stalk her from behind. It wasn't long until my friend, Joshua, fell into the same trend. He kept saying that his feeling for Myru is eating him up, like a bunch of worms crawling inside his stomach. But he could never make a move, just silently watch from behind. It wasn't long before the police found his body, inside his room, dead and naked, with wounds that spelled out her name. The next day, I sat in class, grieving from a loss of a friend. Sitting right in front of me was Myru, whose lack of care on this phenomenon irritated me. My class advisor entered the room, and we all stood up and greeted her. And that's when I saw it. Every hair on my body stood up. My jaw dropped, my eyes fixated. Just behind all the black hair from the back of her head, both lips and teeth, was Myru's smile.
Ten simple rules for surviving the apocalypse. Find the breathing mask immediately. There are things in the air, small microscopic things, that float like pollen and enter through your nose and mouth. If you've ever been out and thought you smelled something sweet, like cotton candy, it's too late. Your lungs are about to liquefy, slowly, cell by cell. I'm sorry about that. Only drink from fast-moving streams. It doesn't matter if you got a water filtration unit. Never collect water from ponds or lakes. It's not because of the dead bodies. It's the half-dead ones. They can stay down there for months at a time, just waiting for someone who doesn't know better. Stay away from settlements. Any half-decent settlement already has too many mouths to feed. If you ask, they'll let you in, but they won't let you stay. They got all those hungry mouths after all. Do not eat the birds. I don't know what these new birds are, but they smell like tar, and their meat can burn a hole in your throat. Stick with canned goods and cockroaches. It's safe to travel by night, but if you hear a sound like a ticking stopwatch, stand perfectly still and wait until the sun comes up. They'll pass you by as long as you don't move. Do not aim for the heart or the brain. Aim for the legs if they can walk. Aim for the arms if they can crawl. Don't assume anything will stay down for good. Just make sure you can run faster than they can. Red sores heal with time. White sores will rot down to the bone within 48 hours. Remove the limb. Cauterize the wound. That should buy you a few weeks at least. The living don't knock. If you're holed up somewhere with 4 walls and hear someone knocking, ignore it. Whatever it is needs you to let it in, and you really do not want to do that. Do not be alarmed if you see angels. It's normal to see beings made of soft light descending from the heavens. It just means there are parasites attached to your optic nerves. They can't kill you. They won't kill you. They'll just consume your parts from the inside out. always leave one bullet for yourself. It's a brave, difficult thing to make a life here in the after, but eventually you'll get tired. Eventually, you'll see that of all the things you could do during the apocalypse, surviving might just be the worst. But that's for you to discover. Until then, good luck.
"Oh my gosh, look!" Lydia exclaimed, running out into the crowded fairground. I couldn't tell what she was pointing at until I caught up with her. But it just turned out to be one of those fortune teller machines with an animatronic old woman sitting inside. Underneath was a sign reading, "Madame Fortuna, Mistress of Faith." "I love these things," she explained to me, fishing out 50 cents from her purse. When she turned her back on me to put them into the slot, I rolled my eyes. She'd mentioned in her dating profile that she was into spiritual stuff, psychics, horoscopes, and such, but I didn't think she'd fall for something this dumb. Yet, she pressed the receive button on the machine and looked genuinely excited when the animatronic came to life, turning its head upward and opening its mouth, making an unnervingly raspy moan as its crystal ball lit up, before all the lights in the machine abruptly turned off, and a small card was spat out, which she then snatched up. "You will soon be graced by divine luck," she read out. "That's so exciting," I scoffed. But if she heard, she did not react, instead looking up at me expectantly. "Okay, now you take one." Come on," I began as I put my arm around her. "Why don't I use the money to treat you to a drink at the bar instead?" But she was unrelenting. "Please," she begged, "it'll be fun. Don't you want to know what fate has in store for you?" I groaned inwardly. But since I still wanted her happy enough to agree to come back to my place after the date, I gave in. "Fine," I mumbled, grabbing 2 quarters out of my pocket, causing her to squeal in excitement. After putting them into the machine, I was once treated to the machine's creepy animated and, like last time, it spat out the card after its lights turned off. "Do you want to read it together?" I asked Lydia as I pulled it out, and she reacted like a kid on Christmas morning, running up and grabbing onto my waist as she read. I smirked. For as dumb as I thought this was, it seemed to have paid off. My happiness didn't last for long, however. Looking down at the card, my eyes widened as the blood drained from my face. The flowery text printed on the card read out, "The police found the bodies. Run." After I read it, I felt Lydia let go of me, and before I could catch her, she already got lost in the crowd. Before I could chase her, I heard a faint sound in the distance that stopped me. Police sirens. I turned to run, but as I did, I saw something that made me freeze in fear. The lights in the machine were back on, and the animatronic's face had changed. She was now staring right at me with a wide, cruel grin. Up until that point, I had always perceived myself to be a fine specimen of gallantry and chivalry. Then, I went and did the unthinkable. I hit my fiancée. It haunts me to this day. Everything started the night my fiancée went out and did not come back. I tried to call her, and it went to voicemail every single time. Pacing the apartment, I conjured up all sorts of imaginative scenarios in my poisoned, possessive, paranoid mind. Around 1 a.m. was when I went into full panic mode. The phone got overheated and died on me, yet no one I called knew where my fiancée was. 2 a.m. I drove like a madman to the places at which she could have been. No luck. 6 a.m. I collapsed on my sofa, exhausted. The harsh sunlight slapped me with a start. It was streaming in from the glass door that opened up to the balcony, where my fiancée silently sat, staring at me. I sat bolt upright, nauseated by the sudden movement and by whom I was looking at. Her hair was messed up, eyes unfocused, makeup smeared, skin paled, clothes torn and wrapped lazily around her body. What happened to you? Where have you been? Are you okay? I fired the questions at her, while shaking her shoulders to refocus her gaze. Her skin was cool, and she remained silent. That pathetic silence burned the last silver of patience I had in my heart. I erupted. My voice shook in a fit of rage. I screamed my last syllable, yet she just sat there, voiceless and emotionless. A tear traced its way down her cheek, and I lost it. My hand shot up in a violent blur and landed on her already battered face, full of hatred, anger, and bitterness. I knew I was wrong, only too late. Her head came flying out of her neck, rolling like a deformed bowling ball on the timber floor. The shockwave pushed me stumbling back into the room. I accidentally hit the remote control as I collapsed onto the coffee table. The local news channel flared up. Bringing to you the latest breaking news at this hour. A female body was discovered by local police this morning with signs of sexual assaults. Forensics results show that the time of death is likely to be between 12 p.m. and 1 a.m. today. The killer decapitated the victim in this brutal murder and took the head with him. Police are calling for it. I looked around, staring at the soulless head of the one I loved, and still do. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me again. Her lips trembled out the words. And that, officer, is exactly what happened. I swear.
What are you afraid of? What chills you to your very core? We all have one thing. Is it dark? A blackness so pure that you can't see your hand in front of your face? Could you last being lost in the woods, hiding from both the known and unknown, wondering if you'll ever make it home? Are you afraid of ghosts? Does the idea of demons and spirits make you nervous? Or maybe it's just people, killers, sick, twisted psychopaths that want to make you scream. Not sure? We'll figure it out for you. What are you waiting for? Click here. This was the advertisement Monday night on my Instagram feed. My closest friends and girlfriend clicked and filled out a short quiz that followed. I wasn't really interested. I was never too big on those online quizzes. When my friend Chris, the arrogant son of a bitch he was, filled it out, he told me it was retarded. He never admitted to being afraid of anything. After he completed the quiz, he received an email simply saying, "Thank you. Your results are pending." Nothing ever came. Sam, my girlfriend, also filled out the quiz. She's obsessed with online quizzes. Even the stupid ones, like what kind of squirrel are you? She received the same email and was pretty bummed out when she was left hanging. My best buddy, Joe, took the quiz since he loved all things horror. He had the biggest collection of horror movies that I've ever seen. Same email. This all happened Monday. It's Friday now. 2 days later, a video spread all over social media showing Chris pissing himself while passed out, drunk at a party. He hung himself that night in his garage with an extension cord. Sam's mom had a psychotic break and has been tied to her bedpost since Wednesday. They called a priest and he's been with her ever since. Her family doesn't want to go public, but they believe she's been possessed. What must be Joe was found in his bedroom, at least what was left of him. Pieces of flesh were strewn all about his room, bloodstain all over the walls. His head was removed, and a grisly cut was made straight down the center. Cops found a chainsaw covered in blood at the end of a trail of footprints, leading from his bedroom through the house out into the backyard. I didn't take the quiz when they did, but the next night I couldn't sleep. I took the quiz. My results are pending. The bar was closed, and Morris hadn't had a bite all night. Maybe he was getting picky, or maybe the city was just running dry for an old fox like him. All the pretty and dumb girls hunted to extinction. No, there were always others. He pulled out his phone, perhaps to prove it to himself. There were more bars, after all. Secret places that stayed open all night. He just needed a ride. The first and only ride offered made his heart go pitter-patter.
Amanda,
He said out loud, chewing each syllable like a last meal. No stars, no history. A little lamp, all alone on a Tuesday night. She was there in 2 minutes, driving a little green Japanese thing and waving through a tinted window. Morris helped himself, diving into the passenger seat.
lovely night, isn't it, Amanda?
The girl frowned, her eyes dancing over so slightly in her skull. I think you're supposed to be in the back seat.
No, I get sick in the back.
She was small and maybe a little plump for his taste, but the face was good. The face was just his type. Okay, she said. Should be there in 5 minutes.
Take your time.
Said Morris. The car was cramped, but it would do. Spacious enough for what he needed.
First night?
The girl considered the question. Just new to this app,
Oh, of course.
said Morris with a laugh.
What color are your eyes, Amanda? They're quite striking.
The girl flinched, unconsciously turning her head away. You think so?
I do.
Said Morris.
And I meet a lot of girls, but hardly with any eyes like that.
But some? Now Morris flinched, more out of surprise than anything.
1 or 2.
The girl nodded. My sister has eyes just like me.
I wouldn't mind meeting her, then. I bet she's just as pretty as...
Morris looked out the window. He hadn't been paying attention to the road, only Amanda.
I think you're going the wrong way.
They pulled to a stop outside of an abandoned warehouse. You've already met my sister, said the girl, killing the engine. I don't think you've met the rest of my family, though. 5 men came out of the warehouse, followed by two women. The men carried baseball bats and big, heavy wrenches. The women looked just like Amanda, an older version and a slightly younger version, both with those same striking eyes. I wasn't sure which app you used, so I signed up for all of them, said the girl.
You know, I could have killed her,
said Morris, voice raising as the panic slowly crept in.
I didn't though.
The man reached the car, yanking open the passenger side door. Don't worry, said the girl as they dragged the screaming Morris out onto the pavement. We won't make that same mistake. It started around puberty. The defiance, the swearing, locking his bedroom door, playing loud music. I don't know when he started using drugs. He didn't even have money to keep up with that habit, so he started selling them. Then he started stealing. I tried talking to him, but he wouldn't listen. Sometimes he shouted over me or raised his fist. His stepfather, Bill, intervened once and wound up with a black eye. It was ruining our marriage. Bill spent long days outside, driving the fields over and over with harrows, loosening up dirt for planting. We barely talked. We were never intimate. So, when I found Joey's note on the counter last Friday, announcing he'd gone to live with his father, as much as I was upset, I was also relieved. Bill rubbed my back while I sobbed, and it was me, not him, that said, maybe this is for the best. I put Joey out of my mind as best as I could for the weekend, and it worked. I actually found myself smiling for the first time in months. On Monday, I decided to call his father to make sure that he had arrived all right, make sure he was eating, make sure he wasn't in jail already.
The little shit never came here,
his father said. I collapsed on the floor.
What do you mean?
Bill asked, as startled as I was. I called the police, I called the hospitals, I even called the fire department. Their calmness in the face of my despair was maddening. Finally, I tried calling Joey. It rang endlessly. Then it went into voicemail.
I'm not here, so F off,
said my son's recorded voice.
Leave him a message,
Bill suggested.
He'll call back soon, I'm sure.
But I needed to talk to him now. I called again and again. On probably the 10th call, I began to hear something. It was faint, but I could swear I heard Joey's phone ringing. Somewhere in the distance, he must have been squatting out in one of the old barns on the property, where we sorted hay and farm equipment.
It's raining, Mary,
Bill called after me. He hadn't heard the ringing. I kept redialing every time it went to voicemail. I followed it backward and forward across the horse paddocks, louder here, quieter there, listening intently to figure out where it was coming from. I expected to be drawn towards one of the barns, but instead I found myself circling back over and over to a specific spot in the middle of an empty field, to some freshly churned soil where Bill had been planning to plant. I dialed again and lowered my ear to the dirt. I could hear the phone ringing, louder than anywhere else. Bill, I saw, had caught up to me. Bill? I began, my voice shaky. Did you? He swallowed hard, not meeting my gaze. Silence, and then Bill looked at me and said,
He was tearing us apart.
"Stop whining," I hissed. "You're going to do whatever it takes to repay Miss Clover for the damage you caused." He'd thrown, or kicked, or batted a baseball through her front window pane, obliterating framed photographs, piano keys, candlesticks, and tiny crystal animals. Thousands of dollars of damage. It was just his latest calamity. I gave the doorbell another poke. "What will she make me do, though?" whined James. "Clean up the mess you caused, for starters. Then, I don't know, maybe some weeding up back, helping unload groceries, polishing shoe leather, whatever she needs help with." Finally, Miss Clover's silhouette peered through the frosted glass of the front door, prayed it open cautiously, craning her neck past the door jamb. "So sorry again, Miss Clover," I said, poking James forward. "But James is here to make things right." She held her head high, literally looking down her nose at him. "Is that right, James?" she asked. James looked at me. "You can answer yourself," I prodded. He gazed up at Miss Clover. "Yes, ma'am." She allowed him the hint of a smile, cast the door wide, and ushered him in. "I'll be back at 5, I called. I'm not sure Miss Clover heard me over the slamming front door. I arrived a bit late, but I figured it might serve James well to prolong his torture a few minutes. It took 3 or 4 rings for Miss Clover to materialize, but when she did, she looked very pleased. "Has he repaid his debt?" I joked. "Oh," she sighed, "there's still work to be done, but James was very helpful." "Mind if I take a look at the state of things?" I asked. "Please," she answered, beckoning me into the parlor. The place looked immaculate. All the crystal creatures had been swept up, pictures framed, candlesticks replaced. 2 of the piano keys, I noticed, were still cracked and broken. "These were ivory, weren't they?" I asked. "Alas, yes," Miss Clover answered. "I can grind up a good replacement. I've still got an old molding. It won't be quite the same as ivory, though." "Shame," I nodded, frowning in solidarity. "Is it alright if I take James home then? For today, at least?" "Oh, yes," she said brightly. "I think he's given everything he can. You may want to wait a spell, though. He's still icing his gums." I halted mid-step. "His what?" "Daddy?" I heard James call, a noticeable lisp in his voice. He bolted into the parlor, his face puffy and red. He wrapped his arms tight around me. What did you do to him?" Miss Clover furrowed her brow. "I took what was owed," she said. It was then that I noticed the bronze-plated plate beside the piano bench, the heavy iron pliers inside, and there, in a cluster at the bottom of the bucket, 20 pearly white milk teeth, some still pink with blood. Mama makes the best pies. People come from miles around just to get a taste. She doesn't have a bakery or a stand, and you can't order them online. She makes them when the mood strikes her. The time don't matter much neither. She'll call you up at any time of the day to let you know that your pie is ready. No one's ever turned one down either. Just last week, Mr. Jones drove clear across town at 3 a.m. to get his addictive, they're called, heavenly, divine. Ain't a single soul had one and not come back for seconds. It ain't the sugar or the fruit that makes him good, although we grow the peaches ourselves and they're the sweetest, juiciest peaches you'd ever see. No, Mama's secret ingredient is love. Real love, essence of love, extracted directly from the human body and cooked to perfection. Mama says we gotta be careful that stupidity and carelessness is what causes Salem. Thank goodness our ancestors were smart enough not to get caught, but still, it should have never happened. Sacrifices are hard to come by these days. The invention of cell phones and security cameras have made it almost impossible just to snag someone off the street, but we've adapted. We all have tricks. Mama's is pies. See, Mama don't bake pies to make friends. She don't rightly care what no human thinks about us. No, Mama bakes pies so that when she calls you up at midnight and tells you that your pie is ready, you'll come straight over, no questions asked, no witnesses, no mess. And when you get to our house on that full moon night, and Mama's smile is a little wider than usual, and her hair is a little grayer than it had been the night before, maybe you'll think to yourself that something is wrong. You might even consider leaving, but you won't. 'Cause Mama usually only puts a drop or two of love in each pie. This time though, she adds a whole vial. Once the smell hits you, you won't be able to think straight until you get a bite. And once you've tasted it, you'll be so consumed with your love for Mama that you won't suspect a thing when she asks you to come outside with us. And you won't much care when she asks you to disrobe and lie down on that large flat rock. You'd be so busy basking over the overwhelming feeling of adoration that you won't even notice the knife in her hand. And maybe once the metal has pierced your skin and your beating heart starts to fail, maybe then you'll scream. But we're so far in the middle of nowhere, ain't no one going to hear you. Yes, Mama makes the best pies, and yours is ready.
He gripped the edge of his chair tightly, trembling. He spoke. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned."
Go on, my child.
Through the thin screen separating them, the priest could see an obscure face hanging low. "So, Father, I met this girl down at the bar a while back. Her name's Valerie. You know how it goes down there, right? You slide onto the stool next to her, ask for 2 drinks, and hit her up the best way you can. I mean, she's great, tight body. Anyways, we were seeing each other for a month before she started to smell." "Smell? Sounds rather crude, but what about it?" "Call me crazy, Father, but I've always known how to tell when a good man turns bad. It's always difficult at the start, don't get me wrong. It's like when milk just begins to sour. You don't catch the smell unless you look for it. But it always starts deep inside. A patch of rot grows right in the heart, and it spreads like cancer cells all throughout the body. Past a certain point, the smell of decay, God, it makes me gag." "Well, son, I've never heard anything like this before. I don't know what this has to do with..." "I'm getting there, Father. I'm here to tell you, I killed her." "This is not a joking matter." "Who said I was?" The priest looked outside the booth. The dimly lit church was empty. He was all alone. "Why? How can you be sure that you're not..." You're not delusional? Oh, I wish I was, Father. I was 16 when I caught a whiff of it on my dad. He always cared for us, so nice and so gentle. The smell got worse, and he nearly beat my mom to death. I smelled it on my kind old neighbor. And what do you know? The cops got him after doing things to little kids. It is my gift, and I have to make use of it. I know I have to kill them before evil takes over and drive them to do worse. But that cannot be the only way. Do you not shower when you smell stink on your skin? Why won't you pluck out the weeds before the garden becomes overgrown? There is no other way, Father. I'm sorry. A muffled pop split the air in two. The priest saw the fabric at his stomach darken and burn. 2 more pops sent him falling out of his chair and to the ground. I saw you at Mass last week, Father. You were standing very close to me. Close enough to tell. But I haven't done anything. The priest choked, struggling to hold on to what was left of his breath. But you were going to. You were going to. The voice was now steely and cold. There is no other way. My car totaled last night, so I had to ride the bus to work. I sat down in the last open seat, put on my headphones, and played some music. As I was listening, I started getting this bad feeling in my gut. I have good gut instincts, and started looking around to see the cause. Nothing seemed out of place, except for the girl next to me. She looked like she was about 12. She wore a green dress and white headphones. She also had a backpack on her shoulder. What struck me as odd is that she seemed to have no adults with her, and she was not going on a route to school. Did she skip school? Probably. The girl seemed to notice I was looking at her. She turned to me and smiled. Ready to go? I was bewildered. This is not my stop, if that's what you mean. Oh, very well. She got off of the bus. The next set of people got on. A girl sat next to me. She looked familiar. Green dress, white headphones, backpack. It was the same girl. No doubt about it. She turned to me. Are you ready to go? Didn't you just get off? She looked at me sadly. Take your time, I guess. The next group of people boarded the bus. She got off, and another girl sat by me. Green dress, white headphones, backpack. The same girl. This time, she didn't even wait. Ready now? She shifted in her seat a little, and I saw that her backpack was slightly open. I looked at the opening and saw what looked like a knife in her bag. Quickly, I got up to change seats. I sat next to a woman in another section of the bus. When she asked why I switched, I told her about the girl. What girl? I looked at the seat she had been in. She wasn't there. The woman got off the next stop, and someone else sat next to me. Green dress, white headphones, backpack. She grabbed my arm. You need to go, please. I moved up to the front and stayed there until I arrived at my stop. As I got off the bus, I didn't see her leave. I sprinted to my work, scared out of my mind, and she was there, sitting in the lobby. Green dress, white headphones, backpack. You don't need to be scared of me, please, you need to go. I ran to my office. People were cleaning out my desk. I tried to ask what was going on. Nobody responded. I only heard bits and pieces. They were saying something about a car accident. Everything fell into place then. I never made it out of that car accident alive. And the girl, she stepped in. Same green dress, same white headphones, same backpack. Except now, she was holding what I had thought to be a knife in the bus. But it wasn't. It was a scythe. She looked at me sympathetically.
Are you ready now?
User stand up.